Sorry, Jeremy.
That's all right. Technology, right?
Totally my fault. I hit the quit button on our live stream instead of the scene change button. One button off makes a world of difference. So anyway, what were we talking about, my friend?
All right, we're previewing July tropical weather. So
Right.
here we go, July 2nd to 10th. And as we were talking about, really western part of the Atlantic. So think like Bermuda, maybe towards the east coast of the U.S. We'll watch that part of the pattern had a few different areas of low pressure
Yeah.
when we first identified it. So we termed it more like Carolinas, kind of just watch that area. So that would be coming up in the front half of July.
Right. And then toward the back half of July, it's Florida. And interestingly enough, it's kind of Florida slash the Carolinas. Like, it's kind of ironic that you and I work and live where we are, because we're kind of the focal points for this year. The first, that watching that Carolina coast, that's your northern areas, but that Florida West Coast part of the pattern, July 11th through the 16th, every time it did its thing, it would cross from the Gulf across the peninsula and then work up your direction.
Yeah, so that's why, again, that sort of Florida Panhandle, parts of the west coast of Florida, and then the Carolinas, those were our main hotspots for
Right.
this year, because there's multiple parts of the pattern that we're looking at for those areas. So those are coming up again. Front half of July is more like that western Atlantic area towards the Carolinas, and then that middle part that's sort of that tannish color there, that would be more like eastern half of the Gulf, and then maybe somewhere off the southeast coastline, or at least near the coast.
Right. Now, when we discuss this, it's important to know we're not talking about a guaranteed hurricane or anything. What we're looking
Right.
for, though, are pieces of energy, pieces of atmospheric moisture that are going to want to favor these areas. We've seen it happen cycle after cycle after cycle, and it leads us to believe that. Now, I would say that if your travel plans have you moving around in these time frames, just don't be surprised if there is at least something of a tropical something to talk about. It could just be a blob of moisture. It could be a no-name storm that Carnival cruise ship rolls into. Whatever it may be, though, there are active parts of the pattern that are approaching us.
Yeah, and when we get towards the back of July, water temperatures are definitely warmer by then. We're not into the peak of hurricane season, but that's maybe just the start of it, a few weeks away. Typically, when you get into like mid-August, into the first part of October, that's really the heart of hurricane season. So by late July, we have lots of warm water around. Conditions may be a little more favorable, so we'll watch that. But again, if you have the numbers or that graphic that shows kind of the percent of tropical development by month, I mean, we had 3 named storms in June. That's typically one of our quietest months, where we
Right.
see less than 10% of all tropical activity. July also, I believe, is less than 10% of
I'm
all
working on it.
activity. And then when you add those up, it's somewhere between maybe like 12, 13, 14%. There it is, named storms by month. And that's typically what we see, is just maybe a couple of them by the time we get through July. And there it is, yeah, 12% of all named storms in the Atlantic hurricane season are in the first couple months. So it shouldn't be busy. We'll see. I still think we should have some activity around. We're headed through maybe a little more active part of the pattern.
Right.
Again, we haven't touched on it really yet, but we have the strengthening El Nino. Will that play more of a role when we get possibly into the back half of hurricane season?
Yeah. You've got the strengthening El Nino. Still a little bit of Saharan dust, though maybe it starts to quiet. So there's all these factors, and then there's the Madden-Julian oscillation, when that goes into phase. And if you're not familiar, the MJO, essentially, there's the idea of these different phases where the atmosphere wants to throw extra spin in the atmosphere. And when the Atlantic goes into phase, we get storms. When the Pacific goes into phase, they get storms. So it's a little more focused on the Pacific at the moment, which is why there's some more activity out there, finally waking up that sleeping giant.
Yeah, it's been extremely quiet out there. We've had 4 systems so far in 2023, 3 that have been named. At the moment, the only thing we're watching, if we want to go back a little bit, that sort of cluster of showers and thunderstorms that was Tropical Storm Cindy. We'll get to that in a moment. But eastern areas of the Pacific now, which have been very quiet, that could start to wake up here in the next few weeks as the Atlantic may quiet down just a little bit. So usually if one is quiet, the other one starts to wake up.
Yep.
And really the only thing out there right now is that cluster of thunderstorms, which was Cindy, now just some remnants of that.
Which it's fine. Let's keep it this way. Let's keep it nice and quiet. I'm very, 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 very okay with that.
Right.
So that said, let's look to the computer models, Jeremy, and just kind of get an idea of what they're trying to throw together, shall we?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So here we are. And right off the top, on the right side of the screen here, you've got that green blob. That is what was Cindy. That's going to continue to lift to the north and kind of fade. The models are not really doing much with it. Maybe trying to find, like there, for example, that's 8 o'clock in the morning on this Sunday. Maybe a little piece of energy near Bermuda, but no big deal there. I'll widen out the view to get the entire Atlantic basin. And there's some activity around Bermuda, that blue, deep blue purple almost, but nothing really impressive there. Nothing impressive in the Gulf, nothing impressive across the Caribbean. And then at the moment, at least, getting all the way down to like July 10th, 11th, there's some lower-ish pressure across the southeastern United States. Do we see a little homegrown something try to form up near the southeast and the Carolinas, Jeremy? It's entirely possible. We had chatted about this, and when we in our long-range forecast are discussing these things, they're a lot more homegrown or kind of just like bubble up around,
Yeah, and you can think of Arlene as that. That was far eastern third of the Gulf of Mexico,
Right.
Then it drifted down around Florida. And that one just kind of popped up, so to speak. It didn't move all the way over in that main development region off the west coast of Africa. We weren't tracking it for
Right.
7 to 10 days. It just developed in the Gulf. And if we see something here, I would say the next maybe 2 to 3 weeks, it would be a little more similar to that.
Yep.
If there's something closer to our coastline.
Yeah, no doubt. So for now, GFS is kind of keeping it quiet all the way to the end. Let's switch over. Let's look at the European. All right, the most current run of the European is the 6E run. Only goes out 90 hours, so we can switch over to like a control ensemble to go further. This is weather nerd speak, but essentially the European also keeping things pretty quiet through, we'll keep going. Something like in the North Atlantic maybe, but no threats. That's July 10th, 11th, 12th. Now, that's one thing I saw that was interesting. So that's July 11th, 12Z, so that's 8 o'clock in the morning. So we're way out there, but July 11th, notice heck of a wave coming off the coast of Africa, and the European is throwing it together out near the Cabo Verde Islands. So it's way out there.
Right.
But the European is a little more bullish with that than the American GFS is.
Right. And something new this morning that a lot of people probably don't know is that the European model, and we'll talk about this, was just upgraded. And something that I know you're very excited about, and you can talk about this, the ensemble upgrade to this.
Yeah, so when we look at the ensembles, and this is definitely the weeds, but folks that watch me on my morning broadcasts know that I love looking at them. And essentially, the European did some really great stuff down the pike, okay? Their ensembles are 2 times higher resolution. They went from 1 resolution and cut that in half. So think of it as going from an HD TV to like a 4K TV. The quality is just snappy. So there's that. That's already cool enough. They also decide, and it's going to mess up my numbers because how many flavors does Baskin Robbins have?
Is it 30 some?
Whatever. It's closer to 50. I always would call the ensemble like Baskin Robbins, where you've got 51 flavors. Well, now the Euro decided, you know what? These amps go to 11, cranking it up. And so because of that, they've added they've gone to 101 ensembles. They've added 50 additional ensemble members. So what does that mean? Think of it as the European model running, instead of the one time that you see on TV, here's the Euro model. Well, imagine if you could take that and wake it up 101 different days. Every day you wake up, you're a little different. Maybe you're a little grouchy, maybe you're a little this, you're a little that. It's taking the European model and running it 101 different ways, and you end up getting different ideas and different pieces of spaghetti, basically. And so that's what's so amazing. They added new skill to it. So for me personally, I have to laugh because it's like every time I feel like the American GFS, Jeremy, is like, oh, we're as good as the European. The European model's like, I got you.
Right. Yeah.
I've got family that's like, why can't the American model ever get better than the European?
Well, and I mean, they're upgrading it, and now it's sort of our job to start tracking some of these upgrades and really how accurate is it.
Right.
Once we get these systems, we'll kind of say, oh, wow, the European's doing really well. Maybe compare it to some of the higher resolution models we have when it comes within about 84 hours.
Right.
And then that will help us when we're making forecasts when we actually start to get some of these tropical systems that could potentially be closer to land.
Right. And I'm just looking because it's, I haven't really looked much at the European ensembles, but just for case in point here, okay? Give me 2 seconds. I got to hit this button here. Okay. All right. So, case in point, this is the European ensemble for July 10th. Watch that coast of Africa, and you see how none of those ensembles are throwing an area of low pressure out over the water. You see that? Whereas if I were to just pull up the control or the main model, if you will, what you end up with is it trying to show you something off the coast of Africa. So for right now, hold on, let me get there. So for right now, you've got that thing there, but when we look at the ensembles themselves, there's not a ton of ensemble support for that. So at the moment, the operational version shows it. The ensembles do not. So confidence on that wave comes down. But that's the tool. That's one of the billion tools that we have. And the better these tools get, Jeremy, the better the forecasting is. But I think you made such a great point. It's now up to us to see what this new version of the Euro does good and does not so good.
And one thing I like to do forecasting, and I know you probably do as well, is you kind of see what model is like hot at the moment, like which one, right, as you go through the first part of the season, has been doing very well. I would say maybe not with the intensity, but an IBM model that we get access to, I thought did pretty well with Arlene. It did ramp the intensity up a bit. Also, that model did very well with Ian last year. So that's one that I definitely look towards. And when it's way different than others, I'm kind of like, okay, is it like this one finally not accurate, or is it picking up what these are going to trend towards? So
100%. 100%.
Kind of go with the model that is doing performing the best that we're seeing within that season.
Well, and it's kind of another one of those is like you have to look at the very first frame, the initialization, because if it's got garbage data in, it's going to spit garbage data out. And so I think that ties into which model is hotter. For what it's worth, I think our Futurecast model has been, that IBM model has been on fire. And I'm excited because when I go up, and we're going to have to chat about this, but when I go up to Boston, to the IBM conference there, I'm looking forward to hearing what tweaks they're trying to put into that model, because that's going to play into your and my operational use going forward.
Yeah, and I would say all these people that develop weather models are always trying to improve them. Yeah. Sometimes it's like, okay, we made 2 steps forward. Oop, that one little adjustment, a step back. Because any equation or adjustment they make into this, it might work for tropical forecasting, but then maybe it's throwing other things off within it.
Well, and it's because it's math equations, right? So it's like it's these are difficult. And another thing is, it's not just a matter of writing code and throwing it in your MacBook Pro. These computers are the size of, when you think back to the 1950s and these big computers that took up rooms, that's what's running these global GFS and European models. And so there's a lot of work that goes into this. So it's not just the world's easiest process to do.
Right. And I mean, you're taking automated weather sensor data. You're taking the weather balloons that are going up from all the locations. You're taking, if a hurricane hunter's up, the drop sound data. Yeah. So you think of all this stuff being ingested. And that's why it's not like these models are running every single hour. They come out maybe 4 times a day, the bigger ones.
Absolutely. So for right now, the bottom line, Jeremy, is that the tropics are quiet, but we do think that over the next few weeks, we're going to start to see activity more a little close to home, but
Right. Yeah, at least the chance would start to increase. And
yeah,
again, the last time through the pattern, we were very early in the season. We did see at least a couple of those low pressure areas
yeah,
around our hot spots by the Carolinas. This time around, it could be just some showers and thunderstorms or stay off the coast, or maybe it is something tropical.
yeah.
As we showed earlier, the first couple months of the season are quieter. We wouldn't really expect there to be a whole host of storms out there.
Right.
It's already been fairly busy this season.
Yeah.
And I know we kind of restarted things here. So if you have that ACE graphic, we could just show that one more time. We've had 4 systems, 3 named. Remember, the January subtropical storm counts in this season. So our ACE score, which is accumulated cyclone energy, that's up to around 10. Pretty far above average for this time of year. Those numbers don't really start to accelerate upwards till peak hurricane season. Last year we were at 1.6, and I think even once we got into the early part of July, when Colin formed the first couple days, that score was maybe, I believe, around maybe a 3 or so. So it ended up being well below average until we got really into September last year.
Yeah, and September was when it kicked up last year. We had this big break, whereas I think this year we're thinking that the end of the season may start to get a little quieter with El Nino. So interesting stuff. Look, at the end of the day, interesting stuff. We are well ahead of the curve thus far through the season. And you and I on March the 1st put out our hurricane forecast expecting a bit of an above average season.
Yeah, we went 14 to 18 named storms. We'll see how that plays out. A lot of the forecasts that came out super early have updated a little bit higher.
Yep.
I don't know if I would want to go too high with just sort of the uncertainty lurking maybe late in the season. That's something that it could start to really wind down. And I think July that we think that some of these parts of the pattern come back, that maybe something should form. If nothing does, then we'll start to be like, okay, is this just going to be an average season? And that's it.
And, again, numbers are only one piece of the puzzle. You get hit, it's a bad season. So that's the other part, is the numbers tell one part of the story. But, here in Florida, we're still recovering from back-to-back impacts. Does your area get hit this year? Does my area get hit again, but maybe from a different angle? We'll have to watch and wait and see. But, all right. Some of us have to go to work, Jeremy.
Right. I'm going to I need to head outside. I have to get the lawn mowed before it gets too hot, and then head into work a little bit later. But just remind everyone, our little update right here that we just did, they can find it online and also in some of the podcasts. Where's that at?
Yeah, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart. I feel like there's others, but I need to put that graphic in here. I'll get there. What's your high temperature?
And if you just type in tropics into the Apple Podcasts, I know as of last check we were number 2 in there for the tracking the tropics availability that's in there. So go in there, support us, and also we always throw this on our social media accounts, on our station website. So lots of places. And then next week we're thinking, since July the 4th is on Tuesday, people may not want to see us up here talking, so we may hold off until Wednesday next week, but we'll post about that.
That works. My high today is 96. What's your high today?
I think last night for today I was going 94, like 93, 94, something like that. If you look at least the southeast, we have been below average May and June. And this is really our first hot stretch of weather that we've had, with consistently maybe some mid-90s. So it's been a cooler than average late spring, early summer, but starting to change now.
Yeah, there's a lot. I know this has nothing to do with the tropics, but there's a lot of records that are going to be falling. So everybody's getting into that July 4th mentality. We can barbecue and then we'll do the tropics on Wednesday.
But one thing I want to mention quickly, that the heat that we're seeing now with the mid-90s, it is actually starting to warm our water up. That coastal system of Memorial Day really dropped the temperatures, and they had such a hard time recovering. Near shore now by Savannah area, Tybee Island, Hilton Head Island is into the low 80s, should be maybe a couple degrees warmer than that for this time of year, but it is going to recover quickly. And I would say our water temperature, given another week or so, and if we stay in the mid 90s and have this heat across our area, we'll probably be in that maybe like 83 to 85 degree range.
Yeah, I mean, look at that Gulf Stream, 85. Good gravy. And then the loop current in the Gulf, 87.
Yeah.
No, thank you. All right, enough. You go, Mo. I'm going to go do the weather. We'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for hanging with us from the podcast world to the Facebook world. I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson in Savannah.